Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And let me go ahead and switch on over to my screen here. I just want to say, guys, thank you for all you do. I know how important education is. My wife's actually a teacher. So, all right, this is the main login screen. I'm going to go ahead and log in. Everybody with Concur logs in at the same point because, again, we're a total software as a service solution. You can see here just a two-factor authentication. You can also get around that with software as, sorry, single sign-on. That's where you click the link, takes you right in the system. That will work too. All right, and here is the main landing page. This is going to be updated and within about 6 months or so, where it's getting a little bit of a facelift. So keep that in mind as well, but it won't be anything that just the functionality. But on this screen, you can see how it's a really nice place to drop in and have like right at your fingertips all the different types of things you might have to do in the system in one spot. You can notice here that there's a widget here for travel. We're not really going to get too much into travel today, but if you're to use this wizard here, you could actually book travel. Another thing I want to point out too is that you might see a couple things in here because it's my demo site that you might not be as interested in today. That's fine. It's just because it's my demo site. Also, you might notice how there's certain things might appear to be missing here on the screen. For instance, we can see how I have a heads up for open requests, available expenses, open expense reports, but you don't see anything for approvals. And that is because this particular user doesn't have the approver roles attached to their profile. This is a regular Joe Schmo rank and file guy. So you're not seeing any of that information here because the system is sensitive to what not only the permissions are, well, not only the product set that you guys have purchased, but also what permissions apply to an individual user. So let's take a look at this then from the perspective, because I'm starting off with expense and requests and all that. Let's take a look at this with the perspective of we're going to take a trip somewhere. So the first thing we need to do, right, is ask if we can go. Okay, now I'm going to go into open requests here. And you see here is my approved trip to Orlando. So I'm going to jump into that there. I'm all set to go to the House of Mouse. I got an approved one. Now, the thing is you want to keep in mind too, like was being discussed before, is that request doesn't only need to apply to travel requests, because that's what I'm showing here. But keep in mind, the name request is exactly what it implies. I'm asking for to do something. And then the system can manage the process of getting that request, that, the ask approved. And at the end of the day, you have not only a manageable workflow that's electronic for that approval process, but also you have something that's reportable and auditable in the future. So if, let's say, teachers wanted to request to go on a field trip, they create a request for that. Because right here, where it says request policy, you can have multiple policies. One policy might be for travel. One policy might be what I just said for asking to take a field trip. You might have a policy requesting a new credit card. Whatever it is, you can have a policy for it. You can have a request that's associated with it, and then have a process that gets managed by it, all in one spot. Keep in mind also, this is the request header I'm showing here. And everything on here, you might be like, well, I don't really use departments or projects. That's okay. All of this can be configurable in our site. It could be anything you want it to be. That's just what my configuration is in our demo environment. Also, if I look here, we can see the request timeline, right? And this shows what's been happening with my approvals, how many approvers I have in my workflow. Here, you're going to notice that the systems, again, it's my demo system. Everybody's named Steve Vanderwerf, right? For my approvers and so on and so forth. They are, in fact, different people. The system actually controls the ability to approve your own stuff. You can't do it. So you'd never have to worry about that. Just coincidentally, the person has the same name. Also, you notice how it only goes to one spot in my workflow. It just goes to my manager. But if you wanted to have more than that, you can add on multiple steps to your workflows. And by the way, this workflow technology applies across the board. So we can do it for requests. We can create workflows for expense reports and cash advances, and even also it applies to invoice too for the purchase requests, purchase orders, getting even your invoices approved, all use the same functionality. And that functionality is if-then based. So let's say for this request, let's say for request technology, you want to include a workflow that includes step for international travel, right? And have it just apply to travel requests, right? Well, if a trip isn't international, you obviously wouldn't want to have that international travel approver approve that request. So we can actually put an if-then into workflow to skip that approver if, in fact, there is no international travel on the request. We can tell that sort of thing. That's just one example, and maybe not the best example in this case, but it's one example of how our workflows can be dynamic and actually read what's going on with the situation to adjust accordingly. Also, we support travel allowances. This per diems, right? That's the other name we kind of give it. And what this can do is, in this case, we've applied US GSA standard per diems. We actually even have a managed rate service that will take care of different statutory rate bundles across the world. In your case, more than likely, if you're to use one of those rate bundles, it'll probably be GSA. But you can even have your own custom bundles as well if you want to have your own custom rates. You can even have different rate sets according to like what kind of travel is being done or what kind of report is being created, whatever it is. Now, if you look here, this is our travel allowance itinerary. I'm not talking about, by the way, let me make it clear. When I say travel allowance itinerary, it's just like where I'm going and all that for the purposes of creating my per diem expenses. And this is all still in request. I'll show you how it gets done in expense as well. It's basically the same thing. But you can see how it lays out a real nice image of where I'm going, how long I'm going to be there, what times I'm leaving, and all that. And if I was creating an itinerary here we're just going from South Plainfield, my house, to Florida and then back home again. If you had multiple stops along the way, let's say I was going also to, I don't know, I'm going to Orlando, then I'm going to Miami, then I'm going to Jacksonville, whatever it is, we could add those different locations here so that way the system could properly calculate the per diems for each day. And that's why also the times and dates are all here as well. It's for that reason, for calculating it properly. Here's the next screen too. You can also mark, now if you look at the rates that I'm getting here, we've only configured this, by the way, for meals and incidentals, not for lodging. It can also include lodging, though, as you can see. And you see there's these different reimbursements, and you notice how the first and last day are a different rate, even though the locations are all Orlando. And that's because with USGSA, for those of you that don't know or how that works, the first and last day of travel is always reduced by 25% to accommodate like having different times of the day. You may have left your house or whatever it is. They used to do time banding, like where they say you spent this many hours and did this. It would have different rates, but the GSA determined that it was easier to apply 25% to the end dates. Now, there's also these boxes here because if, let's say I'm going to a conference, right? And every conference usually has the conference chicken or the box lunch, whatever it is you're getting. And if that is if a meal is being provided, and because lunch could be provided, because lunch, let's say in this case, was being provided, you could check off lunch being provided. This has already been approved, so I can't edit it here. But you could check off lunch being provided, and the amount to be reimbursed would be reduced by the same amount which has been designated that should apply for lunch for that location. Okay. Also, I want to just bring your attention to the audit trail here as well. Again, before you saw how anybody, including the employee or an approver or whoever has access to the individual request, can see the approval process and where that goes. You can also see a more in-depth audit trail of the request and what's happened to it as it's gone through all the procedures, going back and forth to different approvers and whatnot. So if an approver, let's say, changed the approval status, they sent it back, went through again, you'd see all the detail here. And all this, by the way, is also reportable too from our robust reporting tools. Here's an attachments thing, so you could even attach supporting documentation. For instance, like if again, that conference, you might want to see the conference agenda, so you know that there's lunch being provided. That sort of thing that can be attached here. You can see in this case also attached a cash advance to his request. And so cash advances can be requested through the request process. They can even be assembled, like in terms of the amounts, by adding together the different amounts here that would require cash as opposed to being already paid by a credit card or what have you. And here's the associated expense report that I have for this cash advance as well, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. Now, if I click on either one of these, it would take me right in that particular item. One thing I want to point out too is you can see here that's the entries on this request, right? Here's a nice entry screen where I can enter all the request information. And also, again, just like with the request header, all of that form, all the data that's needed for an individual expense type that you see here, like taxi ride versus hotel, can have those forms configured especially for you. You can also add as many expense types as you like and have those configured for you as well. So that's a request. What would happen is we'll go through that workflow cycle. I requested the travel to Orlando. Everybody said yes. Great. We're all happy. We're ready to go. So now, after this, I would actually do my booking. And in this case, we're not going to go through the whole booking process, but that's where Concur Travel would come into play. Or you could also book externally outside of Concur and import those itineraries using our TripLink product. And you can see here that there's other buttons here, which I'll get to in a few minutes. But first, we're going on our trip. So now we are traveling. We're going to Orlando. And what I want to show you now is this here. Give me one moment.
Steve, you're pulling up the mobile app, right?
That's right. Here's the mobile app. You got it. This is my mobile phone. Everybody can see my phone at this point?
Yep.
Great. Okay. And this, it's refreshing my authentication. Give it 1 second. Okay, this is the mobile app. So when I'm on a trip, let's say I just got done. Well, first, yeah, let's say I just got done with eating my meal. Now, before I get into what I would want to do, you can see there's a couple different functions here. On the screen here, you can see there's my available expenses. Those expenses are, of course, for my expense reports and things like that, and I'll show you that later. But also at the bottom here, where it says approvals, these are actually invoices. So this particular view really speaks to one system for managing all your spend, and that I'm able to approve my invoices here that have come to me for approvals, as well as creating expense reports. And even at the top, you can see where I was spoken to earlier, if you have any of those road warriors that aren't taking district vehicles, they have their own personal vehicles and they're driving from place to place all day long. You can even use Concur Drive to use GPS to track your driving, or that person could track their driving with GPS to have more accurate maps and distances when they enter their travel. It will also automatically put it together. So those days of having like a legal pad in your car as you're taking down like where you went and what the distance was and all that stuff for later on in the week go away. You can make it happen automatically. You can turn it on manually, or you can even schedule it according to your work schedule to turn on your phone. But the main thing I want to show you guys here as well, aside from all the different functions you can see you could do at the bottom there, like expense, travel, and approvals and all that, is I told you I got done eating my meal, right? I'm sitting at the table, and the next thing I generally have to do in most situations or other situations where I don't have this kind of product, I'd have to fold up that receipt and put it in my wallet. And effectively, it would make my wallet very thick, probably give me sciatica. But over time, I'm going to collect those. I can lose them, whatever can happen. But instead of doing that, I got Concur. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to tap that little blue dot at the bottom there. And here's my receipt. Take a picture of it. Great. So now I have this receipt. There's a picture of it. And that picture can instead be used for doing the approvals and as a supporting documentation. And that's great. So no more having to save that receipt. You got it already applied. But wait a minute, there's more. So you can see at the bottom there where it says, what is the amount on this receipt? And it says 3120. That's because, and this was spoken to before, we have AI and optical character recognition is able to read the receipt and grab the information off of it automatically for the employee. So not only is it saving the receipt as supporting documentation as an image, but it's also creating the entry for the expense report at the same exact time. It's really smart, folks. You can see how even where I was able to read my chicken scratch, which my I know all my teachers in elementary school, they couldn't read it, but our system can. And even you can see there's like stains on it and all that kind of stuff. I made sure I picked a nice gross one for take a picture of so you can see how effective our optical character recognition is. But I'm going to go ahead and click on
So Steve, just a
20.
quick time check, because we do want to make sure we have enough time for John. If we could get back into the desktop.
Yes, I'm going there now.
Awesome. We'll show them how to, now that they can submit their expense report, and then we can dig into the invoice product.
Absolutely. Okay. Oh, give me 1 second here. I'm just sharing my screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen again?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. So here's where I get back from my trip. I click on create expense report, and it would automatically create the expense report based on the information in the request. So if I take a look at that over expenses, sorry, my button. You can see here I have an expense report I've already started. And you can see here there's a couple of expenses. This is my manage transaction screen. This is where your credit card can actually be hooked up to our system. So as transactions are done on the corporate cards, well, or the district cards, the transactions will automatically feed into Concur. In this case, we have a couple different types. We actually have Uber ones here. And in this situation, I've actually configured where you see the receipts already here. And that's because these came in with the Uber app, which you can actually associate with Concur. So anytime you use a business expense, a business ride, it will flow into Concur automatically along with the receipt information. Also, you can see here's airfare, and here's that expense I took a picture of right here, all set for me to put on an expense report. Let me jump into the report here. This is what would get created automatically by clicking on a button in the request. You can see here's the associated request. And you can also see how all the same functions are mirrored pretty much within the expense report because you're going to do the same sort of thing as you did when requesting it. And that includes, of course, like I said before, those report timeline things where you can see your approvals. You might notice there's a different flow here. I have 2 steps in this workflow instead. As an employee, I'd be able to see where my approvals lie in terms of getting that expense report approved, also receiving email notifications for all those changes along the way. You can see here also there's requirements for receipts. There's warnings here indicating that I need to have receipts for these expenses. There's 2 different levels of warnings you can have that are customizable. Here's one that's not a hard stop, just saying, hey, there's something wrong. You might have to take a look at that. And then, of course, here is a hard stop where I wouldn't even be able to submit the report like that. So theoretically, what we could do is here, let me go ahead and import our expenses that we had there. Remember, these are from those managed transaction screen. I'm going to add these to the report. And you'll notice that next to the airfare, there's an empty box because there is no airfare receipt here. Now I can go ahead and I can attach a receipt. I can even do a missing receipt declaration if I lost my receipt for whatever reason. And not only that, but with that missing receipt declaration, you have control over when people are allowed to use it. So for airfare, for instance, you probably have an auto roll that's one of these things here that pops up and says, hey, buddy, you can get a receipt for airfare. I don't want to hear it. Please go get one. All right. And after I approve this, it would go through the workflow. Again, you have the same level of visibility with the audit trails and all that as you did with request. All of it's reportable and completely manageable from one system here. Okay, so that's the expense and travel process. But let me take you over to invoices now. And log in the same way, right? Because again, it's one system. I'm just logging in as a different user here, so I'm going to a different page. But it's one system with everything all included in one place. You even saw before how I had the approvals and the user I was just using on mobile. So first place I want to go here Again, I'm on my landing page. I want to go to Invoice. You could have this page appear automatically, by the way, if you have one of these roles, like when you log in. And the first place I want to go to is invoice capture, because the first step along the way for an invoice is getting that invoice information from your vendors into the system. So today, if you're entering it manually, you're reading these invoices and have to type it all in or whatever, that's very, very labor intensive. And I'm sure it's speaking to a lot of you that manage that process, and you're sensing the pain, which I'm talking about there. Now, what I'm going to do is, here you can see I've already had this one. This has come in because with invoice capture, that same exact optical character recognition and artificial intelligence that we use for Concur invoice, for expense it and Concur expense applies here to invoices as well. And if I wanted to, I could even upload one myself. Say browse here, say Staples. Okay, let's upload that. Very good. Okay. And so what would happen is here I just manually uploaded this one, but if I'll show you an example of the other one here. When a vendor sends in the invoice, they can send it through email to a special email address. See, this is a to address. And based on that, the system is able to capture that data and use our tools to read the invoice, separate out the line items, capture all that information, capture all the header information, and also apply the stored vendor information as it appears on the invoice as well. And none of this uses templates. I know some people are probably thinking about templates and how to create all templates for your different invoice types. Nope. We use AI to figure out where everything is as opposed to having templates. So no work on your end to set any of this up. Also, even the process that I'm doing here, where I'm determining if everything looks good, it's all kosher coming in from our invoice capture tool, we can have, there's a service to have folks do that on your behalf. Now, if this is associated with the PO, because remember, there's also a PO PR process that's available in here as well. I could request a purchase order, kind of like you're requesting and request to travel. You can do the same sort of thing with a purchase request in here as well. Now here, or you can actually import your POs from an alternate system if POs are being done elsewhere. So it's possible to import POs in addition to executing them from within the site as well. And here you can see I've said, okay, it's this for PO number 104. If there's a PO, by the way, supplied on the invoice, the system would be able to read that too and automatically do this match. In this case, I'm saying it's 104 and it's a different user. I'm not going to do it because this doesn't really apply here, but you can see how it automatically brought up all the vendor information and does the match automatically based on that PO number that's already in the system. Now from here, what I do is I'd apply a particular person for it to be sent to, or a queue, or whatever your workflow calls for. Because again, over here on the request, on the invoice side, we can, and also for PR requests and POs and all that stuff, we can have all that managed by the same workflow technology. And it can be also tracked using the same technology by being able to report on those audit trails and see what's going on at any time by one of the users of the invoice, one of the approvers of the invoice, or one of the one of the processors in the back office looking at them. Okay. And last, let me just show you this right here. You can see this is like a nice dashboard. I kind of blew by it because I want to go right in invoice capture, but it's a nice dashboard giving all different insights into what's available in what spot. For instance, if you want to know what invoices need to be assigned, if they're of the type that wasn't automatically assigned, I go right here and see them. This is pending match to a purchase order. So this is where I could also do the match at the same time if I wanted to, if it wasn't matched already. And also, we have the back office processor tool as well, just like an expense. I'm going there right now. Here's some of my unpaid invoices. You can see here's one that was automatically already matched. Here is the vendor information. And here you can also see in this nice view, the matching purchase order that goes along with that invoice and the matching summary as well of what's been going on. So here's our matching summary. Here's a purchase order all in one spot, making it very easy to look at and manage. And of course, like I said, all of this comes with very robust reporting for the back end of all this. And that's a nice
Awesome.
little taste of the system. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Steve. Let me go back over to the presentation.